And yeah, I appreciate the intro there. And Hi, everyone. My name is Don Fernando. And like Kevin said, I am part of the product solutions team here now. Good to see some familiar names on the call. Uh, yeah, for some of you that don't know me, I mean, I've been in the CPQ and QTC space for over 15 years, starting at Big Machines and Steel Brick. Did some consulting at IBM and Deloitte before joining Salesforce. Uh, and now on Brian's team, like Kevin mentioned, I support RLM, CPQ, billing, and now Salesforce contracts, which we'll focus on today. So, of course, if you and or your customer are in a imminent purchase making decision, please base it off of current and available capabilities. Um, I am my remit now, when I do support Salesforce contracts, is as an outbound product manager. So if you are a partner or even internal in the room, if you're on an active deal, create a DSR, loop me in the process. I could definitely support your CLM, RLM, or CPQ activities. I also want to mention that I do have an inbound product manager counterpart that I work very closely with. His name is Nikhil Kulkarni, and he has extensive experience in the CLM space. He helped write the initial offering here, and very kind of instrumental resource on outlining our roadmap. So I'm very interested in being part of CLM deals moving forward. Because we are collecting voice of the customer opinions and ideas, so we could shape the roadmap together with Nikhil as we move forward. And just one more thing about Salesforce contracts. Salesforce has made heavy investment into this solution because we do see the increasing value proposition of having sell-side contracting capabilities on platform. Because if you think about it, right, CRM, CPQ, RLM, and we love the three-letter acronyms here, but incorporated into that process, into the selling motion, a lot of times have contractual obligations embedded in it. Right? I mean, how often are you talking to your customers in a CPQ or even a billing RLM deal, and there's mandatory documents that need to be squared away and situated that the sales user has to initiate. And when you think about the subscription economy, not only is there amendment potential, but ultimately, subscription agreements have an end date. And when that end date approaches, ahead of that time, right, the selling organization places a high emphasis on long-term customer lifecycle value. And in order to do that, that renewal process of that contract needs to arm that renewal team with appropriate information so they could renew the terms with the customer at optimum levels. And if many customers and prospects today are compromised in that area. And the root cause of that is because they don't have an embedded contracting solution to give them the data and information they need in order to renew a contract or even maintain a contract over time. One of the leading questions that can be asked, during a active kind of implementation or even sales cycle is, how are they managing their contracting process today? Do they have visibility on mandatory contracts in the sales process by stage, by ownership, maybe even by associated to revenue? Like what are the juiciest contracts that need to get reviewed and approved against the juiciest deals at the end of the month, end of the quarter, end of the year? right? Ultimately, when customers go through a digital transformation with, CPQ or RLM, or even just a contracts transformation, right? That is their goal. They want visibility to, to help their organization improve over time. But more often than not, when you talk to customers, their CLM or their contract lifecycle process falls in two categories. First is just like, CPQ early days and even now, the contracting users, even the sales users, are trading contracts, within emails, and versioning up over time in that manner is not conducive to an optimum contract process, right? Things get lost in interpretation. Sales users, draft contracts under their own design. And, worst case scenario is they get an executed contract that was not approved by legal, which puts a selling organization in a, we like to call it, right? Their neck is on the line. So that's kind of the lower level of maturity of, customers with a kind of poor, CLM process. I think, a level of sophistication on top of that, perhaps they have an existing CLM incumbent solution, maybe an ISV solution. And oftentimes, if that's the case, they're bumping into limitations with that solution, whether it be poor customer support, an unfamiliar admin interface, or the inability to kind of reach out to any object or any API field names on platform, because a lot of the ISV solutions do have restrictions in that area and don't have full visibility to the data schema that we have under the hood. And even more than that, when customers or prospects fall under those conditions, a lot of times they have a lot of revenue leakage, ops inefficiencies that can be targeted improvements to help them improve their bottom line, into the future. And it's for these reasons we launched Salesforce Contracts last year, in fact. And since we launched it, every major release, we're bringing new, bigger, better capabilities. But I'll just start off by saying the base capabilities of our GA offering today for Salesforce Contracts includes the ability to generate sell-side documents off of any object, right? You could initiate the contracting process from the account, from the opportunity, from the quote, right? And basically draw a contract from a document template. And this document template, predicated on perhaps the Salesforce admin or contract admin working with the internal legal team, can prefabricate a dynamic template in Microsoft Word, right? So this could be a business user activity that can, formalize the contract verbiage. And more than that, not in the process of formalizing that verbiage, the assembly of that template can actually draw from a data structure that we support called the clause library. And this clause library, all platform kind of objects and processes, is what legal and finance place great emphasis on, because those are essentially the portable content that gets improved internally by the selling organization, that can be associated to the templates, one or more templates, for repeatability and consistency of use during the sales process. So when that is enabled, a sales user in the opportunity or quote creation process can start generating sell-side documents, with the backing and enforcement of the legal team. eliminating a big chunk of the risk upfront and early in the contract generation process. So that's the biggest value that customers are asking for today. That we have a full contracting solution on platform, and that we can manage not only the generation of the contract, but also keep the versioning of that contract as it gets negotiated. So Salesforce Contract supports a redlining process where we can take that initial draft contract, internally, modify it if needed, all subject to approvals, and then ultimately sent to perhaps end customer, where they go through, a negotiation, and perhaps redlining is associated to that process as well. Well, we can accommodate that with our built-in workflow against that contract. All steps along that process are drop-in metadata on platform, which will be eligible to be analyzed, reported, and dashed out, right? I like to call that functionality that I just gave an overview that we'll go deeper in as table stakes for a contracting solution. And since launch and since the subsequent releases, I would say we are at parity with the ISV solutions that are out there now. But what separates us as a contracting solution on platform is, not only our investment plan into the future and our roadmap, but also what Kevin mentioned, right? It's the analytics and reporting, number one, and also our AI value proposition. We understand we are a latecomer to the kind of CLM marketplace, but even with that, we've quickly achieved parity. But we are kind of reaping the benefits of being, using the latest and greatest AI tech to support future roadmap items. And part of GA today is the ability to use AI to digitize contracts and also generate document clauses. And I'll get into this further, but we'll see how that operates and can get set up. You guys might have got this overview earlier. Revenue lifecycle management consists of these pillars, right? And you likely had enablement training and product catalog, EPC and the pricing engine. You've seen the new QuoCal, the updated leveled up version from our QLE, the ability to bring in kind of, the search capabilities. You've also just heard about DRO, right? The order orchestration and decomp capabilities, all leading up to revenue lifecycle, kind of intelligence and analytics. But squarely in the middle sits contract lifecycle management. And we are the first pillar within this suite of RLM kind of capabilities that went live all on core objects on platform. So this is a fully, it will be a fully kind of operational capability on core on platform to manage contracts. And for that reason, this is also the first kind of capability that will be supported with AI. But because it sits in the RLM kind of product capabilities, it does interplay very nicely amongst these processes, and we'll see how that operates in a minute. So when you do get RLM, when a customer does purchase RLM, they do get contract lifecycle management capabilities, which I'll demo in a minute. But CLM is also sold as an add-on to our existing CPQ managed package, right? So keep that in mind. If an existing customer that is not, immediately kind of has any compelling reason to cut over to RLM, but still wants a contracting solution, they must have CPQ Plus. And with CPQ Plus, you have the kind of, fringe benefits of orders and advanced approvals and other things. But that is a mandatory SKU in order to sell Salesforce contracts with CPQ managed package. Salesforce contracts can also be sold with industry products, right? Manufacturing cloud, automotive cloud, financial services cloud, health cloud, customer goods cloud, and public sector. So keep in mind, Salesforce contracts, right, not only comes with RLM, but can be sold with CPQ Plus and selective industry solutions. We'll get deeper into each one of these capabilities, but I think this is a very good illustration on how the workflow process of CLM and its capabilities stretch out to provide customer value from left to right. Okay, we will see how Salesforce contracts can now not only be the customer system of record, but also the contract system of record. Executed documents and all contracts in flight, it is stored on platform, which creates Salesforce as the contract document repository. The initiation of those contracts, like I said before, starts with generating a contract template, drawing from the contract library. And this is all ahead of what we call an authoring process, right? The templating, the clause library, in that process can be leveraged using an Azure or Office 365 cloud-based session using Word and the use of our connector. But once that admin task is squared away, then it can be incorporated into the selling process, right? Perhaps in the CPQ motion or the opportunity creation motion. And that's what we call the authoring stages, right? This is the ability at runtime for a sales user to initiate the contracting process, dynamically generating that contract from a template, and all the pre-approved language appearing and just, being created on behalf of that sales user. That sales user can submit it for editing, right? Internal editing with Microsoft 365 is a step that we support, right? It can be subject to an approval workflow and even internal collaboration before it's sent to the customer for negotiation, right? And we'll see this in action. But when it is sent to the customer for negotiation, there are multiple ways the customer can, edit or redline, right? They could use Microsoft 365 in a cloud-based session to, a redline if needed. We also support the ability to download our dynamically generated contract and import it back into Salesforce after customer locally kind of redlines that standalone document on their own. So a couple of ways to support the redlining process, which I'll show you, but each one of those contracts that go out, for a negotiation can be associated to a specific contract type, which basically means each contract can have their own kind of workflow assigned to it based off of the contract type, right? So maybe some contracts don't need an approval process or are not eligible for negotiating and redline. Well, we can configure CLM to make sure we just get e-signature and then off you go. But others might have, a negotiation step embedded in the process, and we can definitely support that. There are dynamic actions within each step of the process, e-signature capabilities, and the ability to leverage those clauses that were executed on the activation of that contract to ultimately transform into what we call obligations. And with obligations, we know that is a differentiator for us, but basically you could think of that as, tracking the more critical clauses embedded in an executed document or contract for the duration of that contract lifecycle. Right, we have a new data structure called obligations that can help the customer keep track of the heavier weighted commitments made off of those contracts, so that ultimately that renewal team can get all the information they need in order to keep that customer for long term. I said a lot there. I have a few more slides before the show and tell, but let me go deeper in each one of these capabilities before the demo, because there are some nuances here, even just at an understanding level that can help the customer, make the initial step to Salesforce contracts. So more about the contract document repository and versioning, and we hear this from the field plenty, is that especially from customers that don't have a formalized contracting solution, and they're a heavy kind of adopter of Salesforce, either way, many of them don't know that we have a CLM solution now. So their ambition to get everything on platform, including their contracts, now presents, this opportunity, right? With Salesforce contracts, we can store all the contracts on the contract record. And here you're seeing a screenshot of our core object, right? With enhancements to it. There's your workflow cycle. There is an ability now to preview, your dynamically generated contract. And ultimately, when this contract goes to an activated stage, that PDF with the e-signature is ultimately, stamped onto this contract object in the files and attachments. And now you see Salesforce acting as the central storage, the central repository for all executed documents. That's very important to the legal team. That's very important to the ops team. That's very important to the selling team, that there's one source of truth that was agreed upon by the selling organization and the end customer. We can, when we create this document, from the template, have a dedicated kind of admin layer, so you can version up those templates as you go. Also inclusive of that process, right? We have the ability to version up the dynamically created contract at runtime. So the sales user, either through internal review or external negotiation, every significant change that gets committed to Salesforce, as far as our formal check-in and check-out process, is data that can be reported on, but also eliminates the risk of kind of introducing non-sanctioned changes along the way, which is typically associated to a process that is a disjoint process. So we definitely manage version control at the admin side and also runtime. We also maintain contracts and supporting documents. So we have the ability to create attachments. You can see the illustration here to the active contract. And all of the changes made along the way, we will know who did what and when. So for auditability purposes, who approved the contract, for what conditions did they need approvals, can all be tracked, within the CLM process. Also, as I mentioned before, because this is a platform capability, we can initiate the contracting process from any object. And supplementing the RLM theme, right? Perhaps some customers don't want to create a quote directly off of the opportunity. Maybe they just want to create it off the account, right? You have that leverage in RLM. Well, that same leverage can also be, implemented using contracts. Typically, we think sell-side contracts, are associated perhaps to an opportunity, but many sell-side contracts are done removed from the opportunity or even the quote. If you think about an NDA, that is a contract associated to the account. So we can initiate the contracting process, essentially from any object like the account to support the customer's needs. And basically, when the template is set up and the workflow is set up, it is essentially as easy as making a custom action on that object to point to essentially the OmniScript to drive the contracting process. We can control the workflow within that process. Like I said before, contracts can start in draft, get modified over time, subject to approval. And if customer has, well, let me say this: the contracting sales cycle is one thing, but the document kind of process cycle can be customized to however the customer needs, right? So here you see the initial default workflow cycle that comes with the CLM solution, but that can definitely be reverse engineered and modified, by partners or even the customer admin as they go into the future. More about the clause library, and oftentimes in the selling motion for CLM, right? You will have sales leadership or ops in the room, and they resonate because they react to CLM positively because it is incorporated in the selling motion and forces automation, which is great. But a large percentage of the time, you're going to have legal in the room, and their needs are quite different than sales and ops, right? They're more kind of focused on the reports and dashboards that's going to help them give full visibility across their account base on what liability their organization is subject for. They are also very, a big priority for them is the clause library, right? Is to have, a central repository of approved and formal legal language parsed off in clauses so that it could be not only, attached to the contract template, but also so they can modify it over time if needed. And you'll find, in a disjoint process, this is done one-off every time, typically when a contract need arises. But now that we have a clause library supporting the templates and approval process behind it, they can be reassured in this selling motion, right, that their needs to centralize the clauses and have the process to evolve it over time is supported by Salesforce contracts. I bring this up because the legal team a lot of times is not the ultimate decision maker, but they are a very significant shareholder in the process and should be considered not only for the implementation, but also upfront in the selling cycle when you sell RLM and also CLM with it. But we'll see the ability to create the clause, how it's attached to the template. But this is definitely one of the things legal is very interested in. Generate accurate contracts and drafts from templates. I mentioned this many times already, but I will say we do have a integration with Microsoft Office 365 that supports this process and also the redlining process. So, and this is very important because this is not sold with CLM. It is a recommendation that Microsoft Azure and the ability for that customer to provision Office 365 users to the CLM users is part of the package, is part of the implementation and selling motion for CLM. If they do adopt this approach, then they will have the ability to use what we call a Salesforce connector for Microsoft Word that allows visibility from the Microsoft Word session to gain access to the clauses, to the clause library and other functionality. So it's important for you to understand that the Salesforce Contracts connector allows for redlining. It also allows for the creation of templates with clauses embedded in it. So that connector is used both ways, right? At runtime, it allows visibility into approved clauses that could be attached to that template. But the creation of that template, you'll need the connector to draw from the clause library. Now, there are some customers that do not want Microsoft Office 365 Word, and maybe at the lower end of sophistication in the CLM kind of maturity spectrum, where perhaps they're just they have a disjoint system of, local Word documents, and they want to move forward, at least on the initial release, to roll out Salesforce contracts and still email to the customer, have the customer redline on their local version of Word, and then have Salesforce contracts import that back in. That is still supported too. And there are some customers in that scenario. So if they do not choose Microsoft Word Office 365 and the Azure tenant integration, we can still support that process. They just have to use Microsoft Word Local to create the contract template without using the contract library. Essentially, their contract template is all static text at that point, and their negotiation process that needs to support Redline at runtime, has to leverage our download capabilities to download our drafted contract into a DOC file type, and then exchange that for redlining purposes off, in a local setting. But we can still version up and maintain version control as long as we import that back in. And I'll show you that in the demo here. But this is an important note. The Salesforce connector for Word requires an Azure tenant integration. With that Azure tenant integration and and our Salesforce contract embedded in Microsoft Word sessions, like I said before, that supports our redlining process. But also note, with this Office 365, word processing capabilities comes the ability to format, the ability to shape up your tables, the ability to, track changes, copy other users in that Word session. So the benefit of that partnership is very supportive of a contracting process that's developing as our best practice. So keep that in mind, right? The Microsoft Office 365 connector allows us to redline to create more efficiency in this CLM process. We also have in CLM the ability to integrate with e-signature solutions, whatever the customer wants. By default, we do have out-of-box integration with DocuSign, but Adobe Sign and others are also supported. There's just and the integration to this is very similar to CPQ integration, right? Essentially, you place the e-sign tags on your document template, and as long as you have kind of the integration with that e-vendor set up in your integration settings, you're good to go. So very simple setup there. I will say the document workflow associated to the contract type is separate from advanced approvals. The document workflow within contracts works at the object state and object transition level. So these chevrons here are all driven from that. The benefit to that is within that document workflow, you can define specific actions within each chevron to control the process, right? So you could either move forward or revert back within this process, all predefined in the object state transitions. But keep in mind, each of these transitions are eligible to be reported out and dashed and analyzed. So the legal team, even the ops team, find great value at the ability to leverage these stages within the document workflow to to find out, who owns what contracts in what stage. Okay, this is a new data structure that is relevant to CLM. It's called obligations. Uh, and I'm going to say it's loosely associated to the contracting process. So the idea is uh, an obligation is instantiated and typically associated to clauses from the executed contract, right? So here you can see a couple, obligations that were derived from an executed document, right? Delivery terms, perhaps might have been negotiated during the contract lifecycle, but once it's executed, whatever that term was, might be heavy enough, might have a time frame on the delivery commitment, and that dictates the creation of an obligation, right? From this obligation, right, you could put a description on it. You can assign it to an internal user, that can own this obligation for the duration of the contract. And then you could even assign tasks to this obligation. So when that contract is executed, the selling organization can be confident that the critical clauses on that executed document is not only kind of tracked along the way, but can be reported on during the life cycle of the contract. We'll see more of that in a minute here. Just a couple more slides before the demo, but we do have, contracts is the first example of kind of the use of AI. I will say AI does require an additional SKU when sold, right? It is Einstein for sales or Einstein for service is mandatory. Essentially, when we do legal contract digitization, that is the ability to bring in a PDF document on an import, which can be subject to Einstein AI, which essentially acts as an OCR utility. OCR is optical character recognition, which basically has the robot look at the PDF, understand where the metadata is and the clauses, and has the ability to parse that out. So on a PDF document, and the PDF document can represent, third-party paper or even legacy contracts, right, from an incumbent system. We have the ability to use Einstein AI to recognize that contract, parse out the start and end date, maybe contract type, maybe the account that's associated with that contract. That's the metadata. And also have the option to read all the clauses in that PDF and extract it out for future use for the contract admin. Okay, so that's one level of AI currently at GA. The other level is smart clause generation, right? And this is more for the legal team assembling their clause library. We have the embedded Einstein GPT capability to recommend clauses given a prompt. So like, Kevin said, right? Like in EMEA, I need a force majeure clause for my EMEA customers, with a COVID-19 consideration who who might be affected by the Red Sea conflict or something like that. That can be thrown into the prompt. AI can generate a clause, expedite the process of building up the clause library. But keep in mind, if a customer wants Contracts AI, they do need to purchase the additional SKU, Einstein for sales or Einstein for services. Also additional SKU sold, in addition to Salesforce contracts is contracts analytics, right? With standard reports, you can get, some pretty valuable contracting, analytics. But on top of that, we do have a contracts analytics module that is sold separately. Out of box, right? You can identify, have trends tracked along the way, have prefabricated dashlets to chunk out your contracts by status, by revenue, and so on. So keep that in mind too. That is an add-on to Salesforce contracts. Now, I know I talked a lot. I just had my first cup of coffee. It is morning here stateside. But before I get into the demo, is there any questions I can address or any points of clarity we can do now?
Yeah, we got a couple here in the room.
Okay.
Thanks for that, Tom. Quick question around document storage. So we're obviously keeping templates and storing each of the contracts on the account. Are we doing anything around the storage side of things, or can we store outside of the system?
Yeah, so essentially when the contract lifecycle ends with an executed document, we, and it goes for e-signature, we by default plant that PDF in files and attachments under the contract object, right? That is the ultimate parking spot for the executed document. Along the way, of course, there could be key metadata that is stamped on the contract record for reportability and tracking purposes too. But the actual document lives on the related list of the contract object. Now, some customers might have significant volume of contracts, right? And maybe size and platform limitations need to be considered. That's more of a platform capability that needs to be folded in, and also based off of the customer's archiving strategy that will be considered in kind of the contracts dialogue. So keep that in mind. But contracts does not have a out-of-box archiving strategy right now.
Okay, thank you. Just one more question. I think you covered part of it. So if we're thinking about third-party contracts where the customers want to use their contracts, that's covered, isn't it? You mentioned about the being able to recognize the metadata and create clauses based on that. Is that what you were talking about?
Yes.
Perfect.
Yes.
Thank you.
Hey, just a quick question. So in terms of RLM and the people involved in the process so far, it looks like it's mostly sales, ops, kind of users at the moment. With CLM, we open the door to legal. What are your thoughts on legal using Salesforce as a platform for sales contracts, but also using maybe another platform for buy-side partner agreements, HR contracts that they're probably utilizing today?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, our contracting solution naturally fits into the selling cycle, and that's why we are focused on supporting sell-side contracting use cases now and into the future. Buy-side contracting is a different level, mainly because of the downstream integrations required to support those commitments. In fact, a lot of the buy-side solutions at the ISV level have out-of-box connectors to procurement systems and ERPs, and we're just not going to play in that area because a lot of the buy-side contracting needs require that when they make entity-to-entity commitments, right? So it's and we are saying that we can coexist with a buy-side contract solution, and that's healthy. And in fact, a lot of customers, and enterprise customers run in that motion. But if there is a certain segment of the market that wants to consider Salesforce contracts for simple buy-side contracts. So you'll see in the demo here, what we can support at the sell side is very robust, right? We have a document workflow. We can support redlining and approval process, e-signature, all of that. And if the buy-side requirements are essentially at that level, then we can make the stretch and support that. But as soon as the buy-side requirements start saying, hey, I need dynamic data, contingent on, POs from this procurement system or something like that, you know, we're not gonna support that level of kind of integration immediately. So I know that was a fuzzy answer, but that is our kind of motto right now. I mean, we are squarely secured as a sell side contracting solution. If customer has buy side needs, let's evaluate if it's a simple buy side need, and if we could support. Otherwise, we're going to have to, you know, we're you know, otherwise, yeah, we're not going to support it out of box.
I don't know if that was a fuzzy answer, but I did see a hand gesture over here. I'm not sure.
Was it a thumbs up or something otherwise?
It was not a thumb, but it was a digit. You got a question?
Is this? Yeah, sorry. I've got a fuzzy question. I noticed one of the obligations was sort of talking about things related to the delivery of product. Is this suggesting, because I know that in Orchestration Manager, you can kind of set SLAs and obviously your manual tasks are assigned to people. Is there a kind of a future evolution of a linkage between obligations on the contract side and things going on in the Orchestration Manager space, or am I smoking something?
No, I mean, you're reading the tea leaves for sure. And there is, so I mentioned we are latecomer to the CLM market, but it does give us some advantages. We looked at the kind of capabilities of, you know, solutions out there now. One thing we could really plant our foot down and run with it into the future with continued investment into our roadmap is obligations and the use of AI. You'll see in the demo the manual creation of these obligations, which means that a contract admin will still have to eyeball the clause, do some level of interpretation, and create the obligation under their own interpretation, right, from that executed clause. That's where in our future roadmap, we're going to have AI look at that executed clause, recommend a value to the automatic creation of that obligation to expedite, you know, the downstream kind of implications. On top of that, the obligation data structure will be enhanced into the next releases. You know, and this is all safe harbor, but post Dreamforce release, right, expect to see continued improvements at the obligation level. Essentially, like obligation types can be defined, and more switches essentially on the obligation that'll lead to a risk management capability.
Yeah, because as I was going to say, it can kind of how the orchestration plan executes when you get into amber and red SLAs against milestones before you've got to the particular point. You could link that back to the obligation and put a flag against that. So yeah,
that's right. That's right.
Powerful.
So just think of it this way, though. But when that quote with the executed contract instantiates an order, that could be the conditional trigger to come back to the obligation to start creating tasks against that obligation. So that delivery commitment you were speaking of, right? I mean, that's not hard until money comes in and we have a true order, right? Well, start the clock on the obligation. And that might mean prompt the delivery manager and prompt the customer, you know, that delivery, it's on its way and so on. Those essentially morph to tasks. Eventually, I mean, if you had to do that today, it would be platform extensibility, but expect on the roadmap into the future, more out-of-box kind of zip ties to make that happen on the full RLM solution.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Let's do one more question and then jump into the demo. Karen, you have a question?
Yeah, thanks, Karen. Thanks, Don. So would we be supporting like merge fields, like account name, start date, end date, which can be pulled from the contract object into the contract document? Yeah,
that is supported. And that's a good question. I mean, so yeah, you'll see this in the demo, but as far as the template creation is concerned, it's a 3-step process to get that dynamic data to render on the dynamic contract. But I will note, there are some vendors that do the other way around. You know, through the redlining process, you know, maybe there's a key term like payment terms that if changed during the negotiation session, the expectation is to update the metadata on our object. We don't have that today. That's called true up. But if you run into a customer that has an incumbent solution that does that, recognize that. It's called True Up, and that is a roadmap item for us in the immediate future. So we will have that ability very soon.
Lovely. Thank you. And just follow up. So would this need this Azure tenant for MS365 or not?
Yeah, for not for merge fields.
Okay.
You know, just simply you know, adding dynamic data to the output template. You will need Microsoft Word,
Yeah.
right? You can, that is supported with just the local file, but you will need Azure tenant integration to do the redlining capabilities.
Got it. Thank you.
Yep.
All right, Don, demo time, and then we'll finish up on questions when we're done with that.
Very good. Yeah, so I want to start with the admin demo first, and just, you know, building off of that last question. This is the process of creating the template. So this is not a runtime user activity. This is more the contract admin or your Salesforce admin working with the legal team to assemble that template. And I'm just going to draw on this, you know, SmartByte, this MSA template, right? The main services agreement, right? And this is how it's assembled. And you saw on the previous screen our ability to create templates, version them up. But there is, this template was created using the Azure approach, right? So we're going to open this up in the Office 365 Word session as a contract admin, okay? And here you could start seeing those dynamic tags that relate to those merge fields from any object that you need, right? This is essentially a Word document. In this Word session, notice there is the Salesforce contracts connector, right? So with the Azure tenant Office 365 integration, right, we have the ability as an admin user to leverage this connector to identify, to bring in all the clauses from the clause library, all the approved clauses from a clause library, which are eligible to be associated to this template, in this case, the MSA. So here you're seeing two things. You're seeing tags for dynamic data, and you're seeing, you know, clauses, right? Each of these are clauses. See the border around the clause? And within the clause, it has a clause header and clause content, okay? So that's how essentially, and think of it this way. If you're starting a net new implementation, you know, and if the legal team is concerned about, you know, assembling a template, it's essentially a three-step process. Have the business user, maybe the legal team, it could also be the marketing team, whoever, whatever, right? Business user can initially faux out in Microsoft Word, you know, put the images where you want to on the real estate, you know, use the formatting capabilities, create the header, create the tables, design the document, okay? And define the tags as they need. That's step one. Step two is, and this is where the contract admin comes in. Yeah, you basically save that template back to, you know, the document template here, but each document template is associated with data raptors, and these data raptors, you know, is an Omni Studio capability that helps the contract admin define which objects and API field names are eligible to be drawn from to be represented on that template. And it's a two-step process. I'm sorry, there's two data raptors that need to be adjusted. And consider this a one-time setup per contract. For this MSA, we're going to draw from the entity contract and the entity account, right? And we're going to declare that on the extract JSON. That's one of the two JSONs associated to the template. The second JSON is a mapping data raptor, which I'll just show you what that looks like. That basically means, oh, I'm sorry, hold on, one thing. Now that you declare the entities on the extract, then you could go into the outputs and say that the API name from the account underscore name underscore C is equivalent of ACCT name, right? That declares a JSON path to the second JSON, which is the transform. ATTC city or ATTC name is equivalent to name. And what is the significance of this name tag? Well, if we go back to the template, there's your name tag, right? So that's step 2 in the process. Contract admin essentially connects the dots on the business relevant tag defined by the legal persona, which basically gets hardened through the JSONs and the declaration of the entities that are relevant. That's step 2. And then step 3 is create the custom action that points to this Omni script leveraging this template to render it at runtime, which I'll show you next. Actually, let me show you one thing before we go to runtime, because another critical component in this contract template is the document clauses. Now, there is static text on this template too. See this? This is not bounded by a clause. And that is more supportive if you don't have a Microsoft Azure tenant integration, allowing for Office 365 sessions like this to use the connector. So if we don't use the connector and customer is in full support of redlining, locally with the customer, without the connector, you cannot embed document clauses, which means your contracts is going to be of the static kind of design where your terms are basically like, just raw content on the Word document here for the template purpose. You still be able to use the tags, you just won't be able to leverage the document clause library. And speaking of the document clause library, let me show you what that looks like. Document clause. So it's under the, with CLM comes the document clause set data structure. And then here you can see all the clauses that were available on the connector are pre-approved here first, right? This is the legal team and the contract admin jurisdiction, if you will. So here you can see an invoice and payment clause that is active. You can chunk out the clauses by language, right? And for each clause set, there are clauses, either a main clause or alternate clause, right? The main clause, if added to the template, is going to be the one shown by default. Any alternate clauses, consider that pre-approved language that is allowed by the runtime user to swap out with for use of the connector, right? So in this case, we have an invoice and payment clause that is associated here. Let me just show you. So I'm still an admin persona here, but using the connector, I'm going to the invoice and payment clause. You'll see here the net 30 payment clause shown here by default on the template. Okay. And I used, let's just pretend as a contract admin, right? I added this to the clause, to the template, associating this clause to the template, but it was all derived from this invoice and payment document clause within the sets. And because it's an approved clause, and the main clause is net 30, that's shown by default, but we will see that net 45 is eligible to be swapped out at runtime. Okay, so to add a clause, right, is you can do it here too. So that's just a glimpse of the actually, let me show you one more thing. Object. So I do want to show you this too, because you will see this in the demo at runtime, is the object states. This controls the workflow. Okay, so I mentioned before, every contract template can be associated to a contract type, and a contract type can be associated to a specific workflow process. So, or what we call object states. So here under the object state definition, you'll see this one supporting the contract lifecycle management. And here's where you declare the stages, right? We're gonna see the default out-of-box workflow supporting MSA starts in draft mode, then is eligible for an internal approval process. Then it goes to negotiation. And then if accepted, then we can activate it. And this is the makings of, creating the object states and the transitions within them. There's also object state transitions, which are essentially the actions at runtime that control, whether you move forward or revert in the document workflow cycle. Let me just go into the runtime demo now. So I'm going to switch hats here. That was the contract admin persona, setting up all the, the key things needed to support the runtime process. And in this runtime process, I'll act as a sales user working on this account, right? And before, and let's just say on this account, right, I've already designated the primary contact. His name is Dez. And Dez has called me earlier today, and he wants a quote for my products and services. And for that reason, I've created a new opportunity, okay? Also notice that under the contracts related list, let's pretend one form of sell side contract has already been squared away and situated. And here you can see the NDA against this account pre-existing, and perhaps we used Salesforce contracts to get that done. And, in support of the contract repository, the executed document lives on the contract object associated to the account. Now, since Dez wants a quote for my products and services, I'll formally follow the CPQ, the CRM best practices for, visibility, reportability, forecast to my management team. I'm going to switch this to proposal price quote stage. We will see Salesforce, enforcing contracting business rules. They cannot advance in the opportunity creation process unless an MSA is squared away. Now, to us, this is pretty simple validation on this core object, but to a business and especially a lawyer, this is pretty significant. This means that they have eliminated risk in the selling motion, which will give them a thumbs up when to formalize their contract process. At this point, right, we have a hard stop on this opportunity. So the sales user has to enact the contracting process. And for that reason, there is a custom action on the opportunity to start this called create MSA. And this is really just calling the contract API, whether this is an RLM, if this is an RLM, it's calling out to the contract creation API. If this is CPQ, right, all we're doing is instantiating a new contract record, 9034, right? This is the standard contract object and then some. Here you could see CLM, because this is of type MSA, it is associated to this document workflow, right? Start in draft. You can modify it in draft as a sales user as much as you want, but it will be subject to approval. And if it doesn't get rejected, then we could send it to the customer to negotiate, which could be another redlining event, and that could be absorbed. And if all is ready there, then we could submit it for e-signature before it gets activated, right? This is enforcement of a document workflow against a contract type. You'll also see this documents tab. which is going to allow the runtime user to generate Rev 1 of this contract in with one or more options. Now, I'm manually stepping through this process. With automation, given the business requirement, this could be an immediate kind of generation, but for demo purposes, I'm just showing you the options here. First option is to generate the contract from template. So from the admin side, I showed you that SmartBytes MSA. That's the one we'll select here manually. Again, this could be auto-selected and initiated, but we will demo this experience. But also note, we have the elective to import a contract. So for third-party paper, requirements, this is the utility to declare version 1 from that paper, right? We also have the elective to create the contract straight away from scratch using Microsoft Office 365. Not a popular kind of utility, but it is there if needed. So I'm just going to start the generation process here. Because it's of type MSA, and we have an active template in our document repository, what Salesforce Contracts is doing now is basically using Omni Studio DocGen to call to that template, understand the dynamic, the merge data that needs to be represented. And very soon we're going to see the rendering of version 1 of the MSA. Yeah, so it should render here in a second. I am in a hotel room, so Wi-Fi is kind of spotty here. But when you do see the contract in the previewer here, right? And as a sales user, I'm going to call Des, my contact, and I'm going to be like, hey, Des, I could get you that quote, but you need to sign this MSA. And on the MSA, the terms and conditions, and we'll see it when it renders here. In our demo, the customer will be entitled to 10% off software on any quote. And also the payment terms drawn from our document clause library is going to be net 30, right? And that may be not acceptable to Des, as I tell him over the phone, this needs to be signed. And if he comes back with and says, hey, look, if you give me net 90 payment terms, I'll sign it today. Then as a sales user, I'm going to be like, I'll have to see what I can do. Let me just do a refresh here. For some reason, this should be showing up, but we'll see in a minute here that when the contract renders, the clause embedded in the terms, in the payment terms, will be net 30, and we're going to have to redline that using Microsoft Office 365. So, okay, here we go. That looks different. Actually, let me pause here. Is there any questions along the way? This is a good opportunity to see if I can bring any clarity at this point.
Yeah, we've got a couple here in the room and then we'll go online.
Okay.
Hello, hi. Is there a way to do any conditional rendering on your document?
Yes, there is. So I made slight mention that this is an OmniScript DocGen, and just some history about that, right? This whole contracting solution was actually legacy capabilities from the Velocity acquisition. And with Velocity, they had a platform tech called Omni Studio. And Omni Studio has the capability to do DocGen, which is struggling right now. But in DocGen, at the JSON level, there we go, you saw the tags on essentially here, right? There are special tags you can add to put dynamacy around, perhaps even clauses. So if you have metadata, like if on the account, it is a MIA customer, right? We could use that designation on that on the account metadata to be the conditional trigger to hide or show certain clauses, like an EMEA-based, limited liability clause. So that's a long way of saying that, yes, you can, there are special tags at the OmniScript level that can bound, either clauses or even static text, right? Given, conditional requirements. So
Can
it's
I-
equivalent to the quote terms in CPQ. We could definitely do that at the template level here. Sorry, go ahead.
A follow-up question. Can we limit which users can update parts of the document?
Yes, many ways. So, you could do it at the tag level. You can do it at the user profile level too, because essentially the stages, along with, user profiles, the chevrons within the workflow can regulate who sees what during what stage in the profile, what stage in the contract lifecycle. So are you thinking like during internal review, only the legal team should be seeing the redlining, and then after, yeah, that's definitely supported.
Okay, a couple of quick questions online, and we'll continue with the demo. Jeevan?
So regarding the contract multilingual support, so is this if customer wants in a different language, then the template needs to be in the respective language, is it, or we do support any automatic language conversion or the mapping?
Yeah,
Hello.
yeah. I'm sorry. Can you repeat that? You have some background that's not coming through.
Okay, is it better now?
A little bit, yeah.
So regarding the multilingual support of this contract, so if customer wants to generate contracts in different languages, so that means they need to have a separate contract template with the respective language, is it?
No, they could, and that comes with the implementation kind of strategy, but you could have different templates defining, of different languages. But if your template is also, purely document clauses, you saw in the clause sets, the ability to chunk out, support Salesforce supported languages by clause, and that's another level. So either way is supported. I will say that AI, the OCR of legacy contracts, and it only supports English right now. It doesn't. It's not multilingual support. But as far as templates, yeah, you can chunk out templates by language.
Okay. And is there any way we can use this document generation and DocuSign feature without contract or directly on the code?
Yes, absolutely. And I should have mentioned that earlier. Because Omni Studio underpins the contracting solution right now, and it has the DocGen capabilities, you can use it removed from the contracting process. So on your quote, or even on your order, or even in billing on the invoice object, it's a similar assembly process as this contract template. It's just that you won't have the connector. But the answer is yes. You can use Omni Studio DocGen for other purposes, for pure just DocGen.
Okay.
Marina, you had a question?
Yeah, any other questions? Maybe
Marina, you're muted if you have a question. All right, just real quick, Joseph Gill, you got a question?
Yes, my question is for when we can expect to have support for Google Doc? Because I mean, I mentioned earlier that it supports only Microsoft Word at the moment.
Yeah, that's a good question too. That is on our radar. And actually just jump into the end of the presentation to give you a glimpse. Google Docs is potentially still a few releases out.
Top 235 there.
Yeah. So that is a common ask. We do have it on our roadmap amongst other things. But if I don't get to it, here's a glimpse of our 3RR.
Yep.
I think another important thing here, I did mention true up. We are increasing our ability to do contract search using vectors. AI is going to have some contract custom field extraction, which I'll explain in a bit. And we're building up a lot more on the Microsoft 365 connector as far as contract comparison on the next immediate release. So
And
that's.
yep.
Mhm.
I have another question that customer once asked me. So the clauses have a versioning, but can they have like a start and end date, like validity date? And the question was, okay, we want to generate a contract with a clause that were valid on the 1st of April, right? And then so that they don't have like to look which version. They just want to say, okay, want to, you know what I mean? For some reason, I don't know why they want to have these backdated contracts, but they want to have the ability to generate a contract using the clauses that were valid
Well,
at a certain date.
I think they would need the legal team involved there. We don't have the ability to date clauses, but we do have the ability to date obligations. So
Okay.
embedded in that clause, the legal team has to put verbiage on like this is only going to be valid given these dates. When that executed contract initiates, then create an obligation against that kind of timed clause, and have the obligation with that time bounding on it. I mean, that's one way to support it. But we do not have the capability of, time bounding the clauses as of yet.
That's something that we could put in the roadmap if more customers ask to have like clauses that have like a validity date.
Yeah. We could take that feedback. I've heard it, one other time, but it's not a frequent ask, but something that's in the field for sure.
Okay, thank you.
We've got a few more questions. How much more time do you need for a demo?
Probably about 20 more minutes.
Okay, great. You got about 14.
Oh, well,
Then we'll knock through some questions here, okay?
I could do 10 more minutes and then wrap up with Q&A.
Yeah, let's do that. Thanks, Tom.
Yep. So here we go. Formally, I'm going to check this in. This declares this initiated contract as version 1, but we know we're going to have to change this. And to illustrate the Microsoft 365 component here to redline, I'm going to bounce this to Microsoft 365. But note, I have options here, right? We can select another template. Maybe the net 90 is a standard clause of a different template design. And to the earlier question, right, this all comes down to the implementation tactic and what the customer wants. Also note, I have the option to do import contract. So even if we generated version 1 of the contract with our paper and customer comes back with their paper, this is the utility to support that. Or, right, if customer just wants to start version 1 on their paper straight away, keep in mind import contract is supported. So right now, that contract that was dynamically rendered using Omni Studio DocGen is now getting thrown over to Microsoft 365, the equivalent or the equivalent kind of Azure tenant user license. And now it can be that MSA is going to be opened in this word processing engine. I'm going to track changes on, which allows for redlining. I'm also going to open up the Salesforce contract connector as the runtime user. It's going to look similar to the admin interface, but here it's not going to allow me to do much as the admin, but I do need to go to the invoice and payment clause, and I know it needs to be changed. So one utility of this connector is, of the allowable clauses that were available to me to swap out, I can see the net 30 clause as the main clause, which is why it exists there now, and the net 45 clause as an alternate clause that I'm free to swap out. I'm not going to do this in this demo because the request was net 90. So using the connector again, I will edit that clause straight away. I'm getting a warning basically saying, are you sure you know what you're doing? And as a sales user, I always know what I'm doing. So I'm just going to change this for straight away, redlining a clause, breaking the seal. And this illustrates redlining, Office 365 in the redlining motion. Because this is a cloud-based session, right? I could do all the changes I need and formally check this in, right? And this maintains Salesforce as still the contract system of record. All changes here will be wrapped up, XML'd, sent as a payload back to Salesforce contracts, and declared as version 2. And while that's doing it, I will also say that because this is a cloud-based document, we can share this with end user, with customer. Customer could get on a virtual call like this together with my internal team, and we could expedite the redlining process together. So there is benefit of this integration with Microsoft 365. Now that we use the connector to check this back in, we'll go back into Salesforce contracts, refresh the page here, and we will see version 2 get absorbed into the Documents tab under this contract. I will note that if you ever need to revert to the previous version, you can do that within the Documents tab. Or if you don't have Microsoft Azure Office 365 integration, the ability to download this version, send it as an email, and then import it back in the checkout process is the alternate approach to go through this document workflow cycle. Okay. While that's rendering, we've checked this in as version 2, and in the interest of the demo, I'm just going to submit this for approval. You'll see the chevrons advanced within the approval work stream. We are using standard approvals here, right? And with standard approvals comes, the related list approval history. And paralegal, the internal, legal team, let's just say they get an email. In the interest of this demo, I'm just going to approve this straight away with comments, right? All changes of who did what and when, right, are being tracked against this contract within this stage. And since it's been approved, now you can see it's been sent to the negotiation stage. Now, technically, we made the red lines in the draft stage, perhaps for internal, adjustments, conditional to approval. We could also send this again to the customer, right? And they can open up, or get the downloaded version of the Word document and negotiate further. But in this case, let's just pretend like the approval means, right, we can now send it for signature, right? Customer made the adjustment, everything got approved. To illustrate the DocuSign integration, this is all the kind of starting information DocuSign needs in the envelope to their cloud. We could put a custom, verbiage in the email notification. We'll make sure to add as an attachment version 2 of this MSA before it's sent to DocuSign. What happens now is that payload goes to the DocuSign cloud. DocuSign sends a notification to our end customer. And to illustrate that, I'm going to open up the end customer's email. And he should get, at the top of the funnel, the ability to review the document that we just negotiated together in the DocuSign cloud session. And if I was the end customer, I'm going to go to the invoice and payment, see that my net 90 request has been approved. And for that reason, I'm going to sign the document and be one step closer to the completion of this demo. So I'm going to go back to the Salesforce org as a sales user. We have an action here, update envelope status on this specific contract, 9034. A call out to DocuSign is going to ask for status. If signed, then we're going to advance the workflow. We also have a asynchronous process, so every 20 minutes, it'll check status against all contracts with the e-signature solution. Normally, right, this can go through to activated at this stage. But for demo purposes, I'm going to manually activate the contract. because a few things are happening at this point, right? The clause that that was considered non-standard, net 90, may be the triggerable event on this activation to create the obligation. So here you could see the formation of perhaps a payment terms obligation that we could assign to, maybe a collections manager, started off as compliant. Here's the time bounding. We could start this beginning of the month to track net 90. And we'll consider this, our obligation as a selling organization. That creates the hard record in the obligation, right? Then the significance of this, like I said, if we end up getting Des a quote and then that turns into an order and it eventually gets invoiced, well, the creation of that draft invoice can actually come back here to this obligation and add a task so that David Beebe, the collections manager in my organization, can keep the customer accountable on the impending invoice, right? That's just one example, a payment terms one. This could be SLA. This could be future forward, purchase commitments, or usage stories. So keep in mind, this is what a lot of the legal team and large enterprises are looking forward to in a contracting solution. Also note on that MSA, if I go back to that contract, and look at the related list of this contract, we see the approval history. We see in the notes and attachments, the executed document now sits there, right? This can be diverted, but by default, right, notes and attachments is where the one source of record, ops, finance, legal, can source for contracts against this account. Also note on the account level, this is a CPQ implication, not supported by RLM yet, but supported by the managed package is, if you remember that MSA had a, software discount of 10%. Well, the activation of that contract can spawn the creation of a contract price record. So eventually when I get my quote to Des, to this contract, automatically CPQ will apply 10% discount off of software. And speaking of CPQ, whether it's a managed package or RLM, right? If during the quoting process, a sales proposal needs to be generated, the earlier question about simple DocGen, if the sales proposal requirements are really just show the line item grid with the discounts, then use Omni Studio DocGen. But if the sales agreement, the formal document, the formal proposal has not only the line item grid, but also T's and C's behind it that can leverage Salesforce contracts, i.e., needs to be drawn from a document clause library, or is subject to a redlining event, or needs to be tracked for future purposes, then consider using Salesforce contracts as your proposal gen to supplement the quoting process. You see what I mean? And that way, when you declare that as a contract, you will have a central repository of all the commitments there. So I think that was the time allotted. Maybe we use the rest of the time here to go through any questions I can answer at this point.
Yeah, let's go ahead online. We got a few there. Harsh, you got a question?
Yeah, hi. Sorry, I was not able to. In Velocity, as you mentioned, the contract generation is from the velocity time. In Velocity, there was two capability, either generate the document on the platform and off the platform. So how it is done right now, because it was having a lot of performance impact based on the decision. So where exactly the documents are getting generated? That's question one.
It is getting generated on platform. Omni Studio, there is vestiges of that are still a managed package, but by our next release, that should be fully on core.
Okay, because there was something like doctrine or PDF Tron, which was there in the
Oh.
background, which was generating it at that time. So that is completely gone now, correct?
Not yet. No, the PDF Tron is still there, but the dev team is looking for alternates moving forward. But that would be so the seamless generation of that PDF. You know, at the runtime, they will never know right now. But
Perfect.
yeah, we are looking
No,
to sort that out.
yeah, definitely, because those were some limitation on the performance. That's why I just want to verify. Apart from that, once you generate the document, is there any solution for archiving, or it will be saved over here only? Because rendering, I understand that then the new component is there with Microsoft something. Previously, nothing was there to render it like this as a template. So again, that is on platform rendering.
Yes, it is. And Salesforce Contracts right now doesn't support any archive strategy. That's a different, you know, that's sensitive to the kind of, you know, the archiving requirements of the customer, and also perhaps, you know, requirements from other clouds like Data Cloud. So, but right now, you know, our default stance is to park that executed document and files and attachments. It can be repointed wherever the customer needs, though, as an alternate.
And is the API support available for this, or it is still linked with only Omni Studio? Like OmniScript can only render it, or we can do it using integration procedure or any Apex code?
Well, so with Omni Studio, yeah, it still supports, you know, integration procedures and data raptors. So if you want to draw dynamic data from outbound systems during the rendering process, definitely capable. When sold, when CLM is under RLM capabilities, it has the exposed API to start the contracting process, which is a metered event. So yeah, in RLM, the API is definitely there. There's documentation out there.
For generating document, there is a API, then you're saying.
Harsh, we're going to take a couple of other questions
Yeah,
here.
okay, sure. Thanks.
Sure, but Joseph Gill, you had a question.
Hello. No, actually, I asked earlier, but I forgot to lower my hand. Sorry for
Okay,
that.
great, thanks. We got a question here in the room real quick.
Sure.
Hey, Don, you mentioned about the analytics. I'm also thinking about the ingestion of bulk ingestion of legacy contracts. Have you put much thought about that and how maybe AI could be used to create the metadata and maybe obligations and possibly even the clause library?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I'm bringing up that is so bulk for AI is on our roadmap. I don't see it here on this slide, but believe me, it is there. It is not GA today. In fact, if you wanted to use AI, you'd have to do it at an individual level. And to illustrate that, here's what it looks like, right? Like you import the PDF, you have AI suck it in, then you have the option as the contract admin at the contract level. This is an individual contract to scrape. Initially, these are the initial metadata fields that it can scrape, right? Or parse: account name, address, dates, term. You have the elective for the OCR, the clauses as well. What happens next? Give it some time, but AI will recommend what it thinks the account name should be, contract name, term, and so on, for a contract admin to commit. Okay. So it's not going to automatically create this contract unless it's eyeballed. And if the elective for the contract clauses come in, it'll do the same thing. Essentially be like, you know, here's what we think the clause is, where the contract admin can view it, modify it needed, choose to either just be like, just save it to the contract individually, or I want to take this clause, use it for future use, and commit it to the clause library. So those are the demo steps associated with OCR done at an individual level. The bulk upload process will be supported sometime into the near future, but that's an illustration of OCR. Sorry, did I answer your question there? Or?
Yeah, I said that's good.
Okay.
Okay, Don, I know you're in a hotel in California, and there's a great song about that, I think. I think it's time that you check out, buddy. Thanks for joining. I know it's really early in the morning there, but I appreciate your time and your knowledge here. I know there's a couple of other questions in the queue. If you wouldn't mind putting those in the Quip doc, and we'll go ahead and respond to those there. That's going to be the best way to do that. All right, Don, thanks, man. I really appreciate it, buddy. We'll talk to you soon.
Sure thing. Take care, everyone. Thanks.